Viridian, the Green Guide, written by Clouds, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 87, Bakugo. Denki grinned and laughed as Sero used his tape to steal Mina's bag before class and stick it to the ceiling as revenge for her melting the pencil he lent her yesterday. He couldn't remember ever clicking so well with anyone besides Izuku, and honestly, it was awesome. These guys were more the class clown type rather than badass nerds like Izuku was, but that didn't mean they were any less awesome. If you dumbasses keep doing that, Aizawa is going to catch you and kick your asses. Bakugo yelled, save the roughhousing for combat exercises. We're just having a bit of fun, Baka bro, but you're welcome to join in, Kirishima grinned. We were planning on stopping before class anyway. Bakugo just rolled his eyes. If you weren't, I'd be concerned you actually had hair for brains. Aw, he cares, Mina teased, poking at Bakugo's cheek. You act like an a-hole, but that's just a front. You're actually like, a porcupine? Sero suggested helpfully. No, not cute enough. Mina pouted. I am not cute, Bakugo yelled, slapping Mina's hand away. Leave me alone. I mean, the spikes kind of fit, Kirishima mused. I was thinking more like a Pomeranian, but seriously, dumb hair? Do you want to die? Bakugo threatened. Denki stifled his laughter behind his hand. Bakugo was so easy to rile up, but even if he was loud and acted angry all the time, he was a surprisingly good sport about teasing, which, of course, gave them all permission to tease him harder. He hadn't ever really expressed interest in being their friend, but he'd somehow gotten pulled into the group anyway. It was kind of fun. Denki gasped loudly as an idea occurred to him. A hedgehog! They're adorable and have spikes. Oh, that's so cute! Uraraka squealed as she joined the conversation. I can just see a little hedgehog getting all grumpy, just like Bakugo does. I said I'm not cute! Bakugo exploded, his face turning a little pink, either from anger or embarrassment. Stop trying to make me something I'm not. Please refrain from comparing our classmates to animals, Ida reprimanded. Bakugo is a human, not a hedgehog, or a Pomeranian, no matter how apt those comparisons may be. What did you say, Four Eyes? Guys, Todoroki's monotone cut through the chaos. Aizawa's coming. Denki quickly jumped on the desk to pull Ashido's bag down, and Inasa used his wind to gather the tape into a ball and toss it in the trash, while the rest of the class scrambled to get into their seats as quickly as they could. They managed it, but only a split second before Aizawa strode into the room and raised an eyebrow at them. Massive improvement, he observed. Maybe you all have potential after all. We have a field trip next week, so make sure your parents sign the forms we emailed you and turn them in. Other than that, we have something extremely important to take care of today. He glared at them, activating his quirk. Denki wasn't actually sure what his quirk was, just that he used it to be intimidating and it made his eyes turn red, but it still sent a shiver down his spine, like there was something he was missing. It was kind of creepy, but he had to admit that it was a great way to make sure they were paying attention. It also made them all instantly more terrified of whatever Aizawa thought was important. He swept over the room with his eyes one final time. You need to pick a class president. Denki sighed in relief. That was just normal classroom stuff, nothing major and nothing that would get anyone expelled. Everyone else was raising their hands to volunteer, and Denki kind of wanted to do the same. But, well, would anyone want an idiot like him as their class president anyway? Izuku always said he was smart, and Denki would agree, but what if he was only smart on things that he hyperfixated on? What if none of that actually translated over into being a good leader? Despite his doubts, however, Denki found himself raising his hand. He didn't feel ready to be the class president, like at all, but he'd accepted one for all when he hadn't really felt ready, and that was working out just fine, even if it was still a little challenging. Besides, as the ninth holder of One for All Might expected him to be the next symbol of peace, and how is he supposed to lead the country if he couldn't even lead a class? We should elect the person with the most passion, Inasa suggested. That's who will be the best leader. We should do it democratically, Ida shouted sternly. What we have now is chaos. We need some sort of organization. I don't care how you choose, Aizawa growled inside his sleeping bag, but please choose quietly. Bakugo snorted and rolled his eyes, but the rest of the class seemed chastised enough and stopped yelling, at the very least, but they were still clueless about what to do. I think taking a vote is a great idea, Denki spoke up finally. I mean, Yaoyorozu can make us a hat, and then you just put your choice's name in it, and boom, we've got our president. If you're going to do it by popular opinion, you might as well make a rule against voting for yourself. Bakugo huffed. No point in a vote where everyone is just pushing their own interests. The class nodded and took a few minutes to write down their choices. Denki wasn't quite sure who he should vote for. Even if he had been able to vote for himself, he still probably wouldn't have. There were a lot of good choices. Tsu seemed level-headed, Uraraka was pretty nice, and Hagakure had shown that she was capable of commanding attention. But Denki found himself writing Bakugo's name instead. It wasn't like he knew a lot about him, but if he worked with the police like Todoroki had said, then he must know what he was doing, and he'd shown both good strategy and leadership during the battle exercise. In a lot of ways, he reminded Denki of Izuku, intelligent and determined, even if they had different ways of showing it. When Yaoyorozu emptied the hat and tallied the votes, Denki couldn't keep his jaw from dropping. Yeah, sure, he'd thought it would be cool if people voted for him, but he didn't think anyone actually would. He didn't get the highest amount of votes. That honor obviously went to Bakugo, but he was second place, with only 2 votes less. Great. Aizawa stood up from his sleeping bag and stretched. Bakugo as class president and Kaminari as vice president. Now, on to I don't want it. Bakugo spoke up. What? Kirishima looked as surprised as Denki felt. But, dude, you'd be a great class president. Dunce face can have it, Bakugo said a little more firmly. I'm not being class president and you can't frickin' make me. But, it'd be super good for your popularity, Hagakure said. If you want to be the #1 hero, I don't. I'm planning on going underground. Bakugo turned to Aizawa. That much public attention wouldn't be good for me. To Denki's surprise, Aizawa nodded. All right, Kaminari, you'll be the president and Bakugo will be your vice president. That'll give him leadership experience while still staying mostly out of the public eye. Now let's get going. We have a lot of material to cover today, so turn to page... Denki just sat there. He was class president? Him? Well, he wasn't going to reject it, but he couldn't help but feel grateful that he'd at least have Bakugo around to help out. He hadn't really met anyone who was planning on being an underground hero before, though, and for some reason, that just made Bakugo seem even cooler and more mysterious. To reject a position as class president, though, that took guts. He'd do his best to make everyone proud. He smiled as he felt One for All humming beneath his skin. He'd be the best class president he could be so that one day he'd be able to become the symbol of peace. Shoto hurried to catch up to Kachan and the other students that seemed to have attached themselves to him as everyone headed out of the classroom. Hey, Kachan, wait up. Kachan? Mina squealed. Oh my gosh, that's so cute! Are you not going to explode him? Zero asked incredulously. I would have thought you'd go by something more badass. Shut it, raccoon eyes. Kachan growled. You two packing tape. It's a long story and involves a frickin' serial killer, so it is badass, all right? Also, it just won't die, so deal with it. Now, what do you want, Icy Hot? Still mad at me for breaking into your stupid mansion or something? Wait, you broke into his mansion? Kaminari's jaw dropped. How? When? Why? Before the school year started, Shoto answered simply, and I have my own theories based on the how. Kachan, is my brother still alive? Kachan just stared at him for a long moment. Why in the ever-living frick would I know that? Oh, Shoto put up a wall so he couldn't show his disappointment. I had just thought, look, you idiot, just because I deal with underground info and stuff doesn't mean I know everything, Kachan groaned. There's a lot of stuff I have no idea about, mostly because I just don't care, but also because in the underground, if you want info, it's going to cost you. Money, info, favors, depends on who you're asking. That's the only reason I even went to talk to you in the first place. A contact had info I needed, but was too chicken to break into the number 2 hero's place himself. So he had me do it for him. End of story. Now leave me alone. I got places to be. Wait, I want to know why Todoroki thought you knew his brother, Kirishima said, putting a hand on Kachan's shoulder to make him stay put. Story time. There's not a story, dumb hare. Kachan glared at him. And doesn't your brother live with you or something? I thought I read some article that said he was going to college or whatever. That's not Sue. Shoto wanted to tear his hair out back to square one. We used to have another brother named Tuya, but he died in a training accident years ago. Oh, Mina bit her lip. Sorry, we didn't know. Shoto shrugged. It was a long time ago. It's just that the way Kachan got into the mansion was a secret passage that only my siblings and I should have known about. I was hoping that Tuya was the one who sent him. Nah, I was sent by... Kachan stopped for a long moment, and Shoto couldn't help taking a step back when he suddenly started cackling. Oh my gosh! That frickin' dumbass! No wonder he wanted to kill the number 2 bastard himself! Bakugo? Kirishima asked hesitantly. Care to share with the class? No way. It'll be way too fun to hold this over Scarface's head. Kachan grinned, not to mention more valuable as blackmail. Besides, what did I tell you? If you want info, you have to earn it. Shoto watched in shock as Kachan simply walked away without so much as a backward glance. He wasn't quite sure whether he had his answer or whether he'd just been left with more questions. Probably both. Mina was lost. She was trying to find the room the police had told them, but this hospital was like a labyrinth. It was probably to help with security so that any villains wouldn't be able to find a particular patient if they broke in. But for the moment, it was just making her feel even more anxious and awkward than she had been already. And that was pretty difficult considering this whole situation was the weirdest thing she'd ever heard of in her life. And she wasn't even 100% sure she wanted to be here. How was someone supposed to react to maybe reuniting with just a part of their aunt? When the police had called her family down to the station, they had just assumed that they'd finally found Auntie Dai's body after all these years. Instead, they had all been handed non-disclosure agreements and told to not discuss what they were about to learn with anyone who was not either a hero or a police officer or a member of their family. Then they'd been ushered into a small room with a tired-looking police officer who introduced himself as Detective Tsukashi and given the most surreal news they'd ever heard. Forgive the red tape, Tsukashi had started, but as next of kin, we felt it appropriate to contact you. The situation is ongoing and, well, to put it frankly, a little strange. I assure you, however, that we are doing our best despite the unprecedented nature of the investigation. Next of kin? Mina's mom had immediately gasped. You found her! You found Daita? Not exactly, Tsukashi had said hesitantly. Daita Ashido is still technically considered missing, but we are now fairly certain we know which villains took her. It's complicated, but I guess the simplest answer to your question is that we did find her, just not all of her. Not all of her? Mina's dad had sounded as confused as they had all felt. What is that supposed to mean? That's where things get strange, Tsukashi has sighed. The only part of her we managed to find was her quirk. The entire conversation after that had been a whirlwind. The detective hadn't gone into the science of it all, but simply said that a villain had taken Auntie Di's quirk and transferred it into someone else and given them the option to go visit this random person in the hospital. Her parents had immediately pushed back, obviously. They'd gone into the meeting hoping for some sort of closure and gotten the opposite. Honestly, it had been 5 years since she'd gone missing, so they had all mourned her in their own ways and healed as much as they could. To her parents and the rest of her family, going to see someone who wasn't even her just felt like picking the scab off the wound. It felt that way to Mina too, but she'd been closer to Auntie than anyone else had. She'd taken the favorite niece title and held on to it like a trophy. So when Auntie Di had gone missing, she'd taken it the hardest. Sure, she'd only been 10, but that had made it even harder. She still remembered realizing that they'd never go to the park together again, or that her aunt would never be able to really teach her how to skate. She had locked herself in her room for a solid week and had only come out because her dad melted the door off its hinges. It had been rough. So maybe that was why she'd taken the detective up on his offer to see her aunt's quirk. Even though she knew she'd probably regret it, she had asked the detective which hospital and room the stranger was in, hoping that just maybe there was enough of her aunt left to reclaim some of what they'd lost. It was stupid, and she felt ridiculous, and the fact that she couldn't find the stupid room wasn't helping. Thankfully, there weren't a lot of other people in the halls, just a few nurses and other patients' families to witness her failure. Of course, that small comfort went away, and she had to resist the urge to melt through the floor when she turned a corner and saw Bakugo headed her way. Raccoon eyes? Bakugo looked just as surprised to see her as she was embarrassed to see him. What are you doing here? Well, you see, it's kind of complicated. Mina smiled awkwardly. Bakugo was a hero student and he worked with the police, so she was pretty sure he was technically allowed under the NDA, but he'd still probably think she was crazy. Well, I'm kind of here to see my aunt. What are you doing here? Visiting a friend. Bakugo scowled, trying to convince him to wake the hell up. Oh, cool. Mina nodded. Awesome. Well, I'd better get going, so I'll leave you to your visit. Bakugo narrowed his eyes. What's up with you? You're normally all bubbly and shit. Well, Mina groaned, her face turning a darker shade of pink. I'm lost. Bakugo snorted. Good job. I've been visiting here for a couple weeks now and spent a couple days here after a villain attack, so maybe I can help. What room are you looking for? 270, I think. She checked the paper that Sukachi had given her. Yeah, 270. To her surprise, Bakugo just froze and looked at her suspiciously. Are you sure? Didn't you say you were going to visit your aunt? The patient in 270 is a guy. Well, you see, that's where it gets kind of weird. Mina chuckled awkwardly. The police said they didn't really find her. They just found... Well, it kind of sounds ridiculous. They just found her quirk. Bakugo said quietly. I know it sounds ridiculous. Wait. Mina stared at him. How did you know that? Bakugo stared at the ground for a long moment, seeming to debate something with himself before turning on his heel. Follow me. Not knowing what else to do, Mina obeyed. Bakugo was a complete mystery. He was really rude, but even Aizawa and the police seemed to respect him, and he completely blew them all away in the training exercise. But then, just when Mina and her classmates thought they were starting to make sense of him, he'd drop a bomb, like casually revealing that he'd broken into the Todoroki's mansion. Or do something like show up at the hospital and know exactly why she was there. There was just so much about him that seemed at odds with each other, and Mina didn't think she'd ever be able to make sense of him. He led her down a few hallways, and within a minute or two, he was pushing open the door to room 270, holding it open to her as he addressed the person in the bed. Hey, Sleeping Beauty, you got another visitor. He waved Mina into the room and gestured toward the patient on the bed. Mina didn't recognize him and had no idea how he could have Auntie Di's quirk, but she felt herself drawn to him anyway out of morbid curiosity. How much of her aunt could even be left if Mina couldn't even recognize her? Bakugo spoke gently, like he understood how hard this was for her to be here. This is Ogawa, a friend of mine. It looks like his new acid ink is something he got from your aunt. End of chapter.